Select the
Now,
grid view. You see two circles at the top left, Mayor? They're white and they have like blue on the inside. Click the bottom one.
share contact.
No, just
No, inside the, right under where it says leave meeting, I guess is what yours would say. Mine says end meeting.
Mine says town Nolensville. Leave meetings in top left hand.
Okay, look under that and you'll see two circles. Do you see them?
Yes.
Okay, click the bottom one, the second one, and it should change your grid view. Not the top one. Turn the top one back. Click that one back. You change
there,
your
I see everybody now.
But we can't see you, so hit the top one.
Do what?
Hit the top circle now. To switch your camera view. There you go.
Morning, Wendy.
Morning, everybody.
Yeah, good morning. One piece of feedback I got from the last stream was if we're not talking, try to mute, just so we're not picking up all the ambient noise. And I know if you're on a PC.
Can everyone see and hear me now?
Yep. If you're on the PC, you can just press space. If you're muted, you can just press and hold down the space bar to talk and then let go and it'll mute you again. So it's pretty easy.
It's 9 o'clock. Is everyone here?
Yeah.
Should we go ahead and start the meeting?
That sounds good.
Sounds good to me too. Okay. Who wants to lead this off? Need a volunteer?
Just how about Montique, will you introduce our guest from MTAS for us?
You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
I'm muted, sorry. We have Mike Talent. He's the interim municipal management consultant, and Alicia Hodge is the legal consultant from MTAS. They're going to be here today to kind of talk to us about our charter and different city management forms. We have an outline. Derek is going to scroll through our agenda, and we don't have to follow it since this is just a work session, but it can kind of show people who are watching live stream what we're talking about so they can see visuals. I don't know if Mike's starting or
Mike,
I can start if you want me to. I've been working with the city and Raw's recruitment process on the city manager. Worked a little bit with the first round of recruitment. Scott Collins left, and been working with you all in the second round, reviewing applications and everything. And during the course of all that, discussion came up about the effort, excuse me on this phone, I'm sorry, about the effort, citizen effort, I guess I should say, to change the charter, in essence, to leave the current mayor automatic charter and adopt the manager commission charter. The purpose, as I understood it, behind that was to try and secure a form of government that would give you a stronger city manager or city administrator. And looking at your all's current code, could understand why someone would be asking that or thinking about that. to make that charter change, you all have to do a referendum, which is our understanding. There is an effort underway to secure the signatures to petition for a referendum. Have no idea where that is in the process. But in reviewing the current municipal code for Nolensville, and Alicia and I talking about it, we believe if the city wants to make a change, if the Board of Mayor and Aldermen want to make a change, then they can make that change by ordinance and not have to do a referendum. There are some questions regarding that referendum, financial related questions, that we're not sure what the outcome would be. If we make a change by ordinance, everything will be the same as it is, except for the strength of the administrator going forward. And so that's why we kind of call for this work session to discuss this with you all. In the recruiting process for a city manager, managers, professionals with a lot of experience looking at the wording of your all's municipal code could have some hesitation in terms of applying for the position, and understand why they would and where they're coming from in that regard. And it's just something that we felt like, Alicia and I felt like we needed to discuss with you all. Since we set up for a work session, you all have had a meeting, and is our understanding Wendy has proposed an ordinance to make some changes as it pertains to the strength of the town administrator. And it is also our understanding that that ordinance passed unanimously. Alicia has reviewed the ordinance, answered questions on that, consulted with Wendy, and also I think with the city attorney. And so we're in position that if you all want to discuss that ordinance now, we can. If you've got questions regarding our suggestions for a change, willing to discuss those with you. We feel like as long as that referendum is out there in limbo, so to speak, that's going to may have a negative impact on your recruiting for a town administrator. And so we would suggest an ordinance process to move us past that point of uncertainty.
Yeah, Mike, I think you're right with regards to recruiting a town administrator. I think we're going to start that process Saturday, and I'm really sure that the applicants understand the issue we have here in Nolensville up front, so they would have an opportunity to know exactly what they're getting into. I certainly want to hire someone and spring that on them once they get here.
Okay. Thoughts, comments?
I guess let's just start with Wendy's ordinance that she's proposed. Thoughts on that, I guess, Mike or Alicia?
Well, it Alicia has reviewed that in detail and has responded. I guess the major point that we would focus on is amending the current code, amending section 1301 3A, and we were proposing for that to read as manage town employees, period, the town provisions of 1301. And under that structure, then the administrator is answering directly to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, full board.
And so let me ask you all, have you had the benefit of seeing the what I marked up regarding Wendy's ordinance?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so
No, ma'am.
I thought you had. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I got a lot, just to be, got it last night. Let me send it, Derek, your direction. I'll forward it to you, okay? Also, I just pulled up.
Montique, is there a way for you to add this to what people will be able to see online?
Yes, if Wendy sends it to me now, I can add it now.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay.
Give me a minute. I'm a little slow.
Okay.
I'll be able to show it on the live stream as well.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Are you sending it to us as well, Wendy?
Sure. If I can, give me a second. I have, while I'm doing this, it'll take me a minute to get it and get it sent to you. While I'm doing this, so we're not sitting here staring at each other, we have, remember how Julie, we have the list of prepared questions, right?
Yeah.
Can we start working on those questions? And while we're working on those, I'm going to send this to you, Monty. And I'll send it to everybody. I'll send it out to everybody.
Well, I guess, Mike, you also mentioned that with the referendum, there may be some unknown financial ramifications, if I understood you right, or?
Yes, sir. I think some of those, Tommy, are raised in the communications back and forth with Alicia, and some of them have to do with the impact fees, which, as we view it, are permissible under your current charter, but they're not provided for under the manager commission charter or commission manager charter. And so there's a legal question: what would happen with those fees if you made the transition from mayor automatic to commission manager?
Do they conflict with the city manager commission charter?
They're just not provided for in that charter. So it's a question, and Alicia may want to elaborate on this. There's a question as to whether or not they would die at the point of the transition, or be able to continue.
Well, and that's the question. So there's not an authorization for impact fees in the city manager commission form of charter. And there is no case law that I could find where a city who had the authorization to do it under one charter then transitions to another charter where they do not have that same authority. So I have no idea whether or not the city would still be permitted to collect impact fees since the authorization would no longer exist.
So 618-107, succession to old corporation. The right, title, and ownership of all property of the city and all of its uncollected taxes, dues, claims, judgment, and chooses in action, and all of its rights of every kind whatsoever shall immediately become vested in the corporation so chartered under chapters 18 to 23 of this title. The new corporation shall answer and be liable for all debts, contracts, and obligations of the corporation that it succeeds in the same manner and pre-existing charter, and not inconsistent with chapters 18 through 22. This title shall remain in full force until repealed, modified, or amended as provided in this charter. So, if chapters 18 through 22 do not conflict with the impact fees,
I'm sorry, Derek, tell me the citation
it's
to that, what you're reading.
618-107, Tennessee Code annotated.
Yeah, but I think what I heard you say also in reading that was if the authorization exists, and the authorization does not exist for city manager commission charter.
I mean, this says every single thing that exists in the current charter, as long as it's not inconsistent, so if it doesn't conflict with the new charter,
But it
they
would
will
conflict
remain in
because
full
the
force until
authorization,
repealed.
right, but it would conflict because the authorization does not exist in this form of government or
So,
form of charter.
so it doesn't say explicitly that the authorization doesn't exist. You're just saying the fact that that language isn't there makes it conflicting.
It means the authorization doesn't exist.
I mean, I disagree wholeheartedly that this is very clear, and the intent of this entire section says every possible thing you can imagine that exists under the current charter, if it doesn't conflict, it carries over into the new charter.
Well, and I will repeat that there is no case law on this language. And so I am not prepared to say for certain to you all, and asking this question specifically, that that is true.
But what's the intent?
And I don't want to be in the position of being in a situation where you all rely on that assurance and then someone challenges it and the court says something different.
So you all, again, this, I've said this to the board before. This is not an action by the board. This is a group of citizens that are trying to make this change. So there is no BOMA input necessary. But the intent of 618-107 is to make it where the people don't have to have lawyers. They don't have to have, tons of knowledge about how the inner workings of government work. It's very clear to me that the intent of 618-107, secession to old corporation, is to make it so the people have to get signatures, earn the referendum on the ballot, and then vote. And a new government would be established with absolute minimal, complications from going from one form to another form. That is the intent of secession to old corporation.
Well, and I'm not listening to the legislative history, so I cannot speak to the intent of this language. I'm just telling you what I am and am not prepared to say. And I'm not prepared to say to you all that if you have the authority to levy impact fees right now, that will not change if you adopt the city manager form of government. Again, because we don't have any case law on this issue in Tennessee.
Sure, that's fair.
And that's a gamble at best.
So all of its rights of every kind whatsoever. To me, that's the key phrase there. I mean, that is the most open-ended, literally everything related to the old charter and all of its rights of every kind whatsoever. That includes impact fees and the authority to collect impact fees. You're muted, Tommy.
But Alicia, what I'm hearing you say, that may be the case, but you're not willing to, because there is no case law. That's not guaranteed. If we do change our form of government by a citizen-led effort, that the new form of government will be able to collect impact fees as we are collecting them today.
Because there is no, correct, because there is no authorization in the city manager commission charter language itself that allows for the assessment of impact fees. So while this language might exist, I cannot tell you what would happen if you were relying on this language and then a citizen challenges the levy of impact fees because you have now adopted the city manager commission form of government. I don't know if a court would come back and say, you know what, based on the language in 618, yes, we think you are still allowed to levy those fees, or if they would say the general authority to assess them does not exist under this form of government, so we're not going to let you do that.
So
And what Mike said about the uncertainty is just there. And MTAS does not need to be in a position of saying, yes, you can continue to do that and collect those fees when the courts have not addressed that issue.
I totally understand that, and I certainly hope everybody else understands the significant impact that could possibly be if we go down this road.
So the Tennessee state legislature tried to make it possible for the citizens to petition to change their government. But based on what you're saying, it is absolutely impossible to change from a board of mayor and aldermen to a CMC because you will lose the ability to levy impact fees.
I'm not saying it's impossible. That's not what I said at all. The question that was asked to me in the information that I received from Julie is whether or not the city would lose its ability to assess these fees. And my response to that is we do not have any case law on how these provisions would fit together. And so we are not in a position to be able to tell the city for sure that you would still have that authority.
Okay, well, it sounds like this is not MTAS doing this. This is not directed at MTAS, but it sounds like this is an effort to convince the citizens, don't exercise your right of petitioning and trying to earn this referendum to be on the ballot because we can't levy impact fees. That's a risk. And that's Tommy, would you like to respond to that?
What I'm hearing say that, yeah, that is a risk. If we go down, if the citizens continue to go down that path, there's no guarantee that we will be able to collect those fees.
Right. So because of that risk,
it may be possible, but are we willing to take that risk and go through the legal battle of continuing to get those?
So because of that risk, this entire process is not something any group of citizens should ever do, ever, because you'll always have this risk. It's the Tennessee state legislature failed to make that an easy part of this process, and so citizens would have to figure out, how do we deal with impact fees? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You really
it may
hear
not
that?
make him.
Yes, question I would raise is if we can achieve the strength for the administrator through amending your all's municipal code, that would be equivalent to the strength of the administrator under the manager commission charter. Why not look at an easier, less expensive, without any questions, route to go instead of doing a referendum that leaves this question hanging out?
What are the expenses?
Can we, because Julie, She gave us the list of questions and she's asking me if we can go ahead and just kind of work through because we have a list of questions before we came in. And so it's to kind of keep us organized. Can we just start at because you all have those questions from Julie and we had them ahead of time. Can we just start there and then work our way down? Because some of this will get answered, but it'll keep this more organized. Are you all okay with doing that?
And if you don't have the questions, I can forward them to you. Just let me know via email.
Derek, have you got them on like where they can be put up?
Yeah, I mean, I can put them on the screen, but I don't know if I know which questions you're talking about. Said it's from Julie.
I can forward them to you. 1 second.
So here I have it on a Tuesday, March 24th email. So we started with the first one. The next question for MTAS is how many forms of government changes are you aware of? Can you describe what happened? Can you describe best and worst case scenarios? And just to be clear, these are questions that we were asked to submit, all of us ahead of time that we had for MTAS. So let me go back to this one and ask it. How many forms of government changes are you aware of? Can you describe what happened? And can you describe the best and worst case scenarios? And that's for Mike and Alicia.
Yep, I see the list now.
So I'll finish answering the first question about the ability to request this authority by private act or bill. So when you have a general law charter, generally speaking, when amendments are made to those charters, you need every other city that has the same type of charter to agree to any changes that you are suggesting to that charter. Now, the only exception that I have seen with regard to that in the last several years is there have been not private act bills that have been passed, but there have been public act provisions that have been passed that have allowed exceptions to charter provisions, general law charter provisions, through population brackets. So that's the final, or that's the response to the second part of that first question. Mike, do you want to take the second question?
I'm not sure I'm on the right page. What is the second question?
How many forms of government changes are you aware of? Can you describe what happened? Can you describe best and worst case scenarios?
Most of my changes, 99% of them through my career were with private act charters. And they were all in the process of moving from a commission form of government or a weak mayor form of government to, and in one or two cases, a strong mayor form of government to a city council or manager council form of government with full-time city manager. All of those cities, to my knowledge, have done extremely well, have had lengthy service by managers. And when I say lengthy service, I'm not talking 2 or 3 years and you're hiring again managers that were there for a lengthy period of time. The only thing that changed basically was the administrative process. And that within itself is substantial, but those changes all proved out to be very successful. And I guess my question would be is if this ordinance, will it not achieve what you're looking to gain with the referendum in terms of going to a strong administrator form of government? in which the administrator is responsible for the day-to-day affairs of the city, and answerable to the full board of mayor and aldermen.
Tell us, your question, let's wait on it to answer it until we work through some of these other questions, because some of the other questions will help that answer. So the next one, or can you tell us about the pros and cons? These are questions other people have written, so I'm reading them as written. So what are the pros and cons of each form? I think the question means like, what are the pros and cons of commission manager or mayor alderman? Like, give us the pros and cons of each one.
Well, in the with a strong administrator form of government, you have the opportunity to have professionalism within the form of government. And when I say professionalism, people who have background experience and capabilities in administering a city. They are there in position to direct employees in performing their jobs, doing their work. They're there to answer to the full board in terms of questions, and also follow the full board's direction, because the full board is setting the direction for the city. And so you have that opportunity for continuity. Now, in hiring an administrator,
Mike,
you can make a mistake, okay? And you can wind up hiring somebody that you misjudged, okay? And if you do, then you can simply make a change, let that person go, and hire a new administrator.
So
You could,
for clarification, I guess when you say a strong administrator form of government, that's kind of what Wendy is proposing in her ordinance. If I'm using our current form of government and changing our ordinance a little bit for the town administrator, that's what you're referring to. I'm guessing. Is that right?
That is correct, Tommy. What you're looking for in that regard is that your workforce has one person to look to for direction day in and day out on a daily basis. And the board has one person to look to in terms of giving direction as to what they want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you water things down and more than one person can give direction to the workforce, be it department heads or employees, you get into a situation where sometimes those directions conflict. They're not in sync. And so who does the employee or who does the department head look to for direction? Who do they take direction from? That is a rough situation to be in. I'm not saying that exists now, okay? I'm not saying that at all. But with your current code, the way it's structured, with the right personality in place, that could exist. And that is just a rough and bad situation, okay?
how do you handle, Mike, how does that handled in a commission system when when you have a city manager in a commission system, they're answering to the whole commission. How does that same process work in order to get direction from the city manager?
Don't misunderstand a city manager commission form of government as being equivalent to a city commission form of government. Those commissioners are board members. They're just like aldermen in terms of their status within the city structure. They are board members. The name of the board is city commission, okay? If they were a commission form of government, then among those commissioners, things would be divided up, and you'd have a commissioner over police, you'd have a commissioner over finance, and a commissioner over et cetera, et cetera. If you had something of that nature, and also had a city manager in place, it would just be chaotic, because you've got the potential for two different individuals directing the operations of respective departments. And that's just chaotic, or has the potential to be.
So a commission-based system has potential to be chaotic. Is that what I just heard?
What I'm talking about, Derek, is not the general law manager commission form of government. What I'm talking about is a city commission form of government, which in Tennessee only exists in private acts. It doesn't exist in general law. So I've tried to make clear your city manager commission system in general law is same as city manager council in general law. They just use the terminology commission instead of council.
So, but why are we discussing? I don't understand why we're discussing a commission or council-based system. What like BOMA can't change to a commission-based system. It requires a referendum. We could pass a resolution saying we're intending to do that, but we still have to get the signatures. All that's being done without BOMA's input, without BOMA's approval, without anything from BOMA. So that, to me, that has absolutely nothing to do with this discussion. If we want to talk about what we can do under our current charter and amending our current charter, great. But to talk about a commission-based system or say anything negative about commission-based systems in general, to me, is fear-mongering. People want you're putting that message out there because you want the people following that referendum process to hear it.
I'm not fear-mongering whatsoever. I'm simply trying to clarify, and I think I did clarify that your current general law commission or manager commission charter is same as a general law manager council charter. In other words, that commission serves as the governing body, as the board. They are not part of the day-to-day administration. That's the city manager. Okay. But in Tennessee, you've got a lot of cities that are quote unquote private acts. In other words, their charters are designed specifically for that city. There's not many commission charters left, but there used to be quite a few cities that were commission form of government. And I described that commission form of government as individuals being in charge of different parts of the city's operation. Just simply doing that from an educational standpoint, definitely not from a fear-mongering standpoint. What we're trying to suggest is if you want to make a change, if you want to strengthen your administrator to be as strong as you would like that person to be, and under your current charter, you can do that by ordinance. If you wish to pass an ordinance, what is the problem with passing an ordinance?
Absolutely nothing. I'm voted to on first reading on our changes. I'm for strengthening the power of the town administrator. That's great.
And all I'm saying is if you do that, then I'm not sure what you gain with a referendum to change to the manager commission charter.
So again, why are we speaking about a referendum that BOMA has no say, control, or input about? That putting information out about the referendum, the only thing that could accomplish is it scares the citizens into stopping their referendum efforts.
Well, I think the reason why we're talking about this is because we were asked to address some questions that were sent to us, and it sounded, based on what Wendy just said, that they were sent to us as a compilation of questions that were submitted by the board. And so at this juncture, the only reason that that's even come up because we were fully just prepared to talk about Wendy's ordinance. But the only reason that that has now come up is because we have been asked to address the questions that were submitted.
Well, and to be fair, we were having this discussion before I even had an ordinance, and my ordinance is not, it is not to stop the citizens' attempt to change the charter. This is, I'm completely just, what do we do with our current system? How do we make it work? That's what it's doing. So I'm trying to figure out what that involves. But overall, this whole discussion came up before I even proposed the ordinance that I proposed.
But in the process, Derek, what does it hurt getting out information about changing a form of government? It doesn't hurt anything.
No, doesn't hurt anything. It's great.
Okay. What's the next question, Wendy?
Well, I'm not sure that I understood the answer to, so the cons of the manager commission system are what? What are the cons of a manager commission system?
I'm not saying there are any.
Okay, what we're trying to, like, if we're trying to go back and forth, just take out any costs of changing over to one system or the other, just looking at each system on its own. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each system? Because there's
Well,
good and bad to doing each one. What are those?
the biggest difference that I would show is that under the current charter, you have an exercise by ordinance to give the manager as much strength as you could give the manager in terms of administration. You have chosen to have an administrator, but again, you have not extended to that administrator the strengths that would be obtained through the manager commission charter. But by ordinance, you can extend to that administrator those same administrative strengths. Question being is, do you want to do that? Or do you want to wait and just do it through referendum? I guess if you do it by ordinance, then you've got it done, and you're on down the road as far as other operations and things with the city. Also, you clarified a point as far as your recruitment for potential city administrator.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. How does the CEO clause in the mayor aldermanic charter work in conjunction with giving duties and responsibilities to a town administrator or a city manager? Is there a case that the mayor could make that I'm the CEO, I have the final say in this situation? Or if there's any kind of conflict, if there's any of the powers that are delegated down, can that CEO clause pull them back?
It is the responsibility of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to administer those delegations via ordinance. And if they choose to do so, then no, they cannot be pulled back by the mayor. Alicia,
But I also think that it's important to clearly articulate what those duties and responsibilities are. And I think that's where it's become problematic in some of my other cities. So if you don't clearly articulate what they are and what the delineation of power is,
right,
then that's where you get into an issue. But as long as there's clear authority and a clear delineation, it should not be an issue.
When I hear the word CEO in my head, it implies at the end of the day, the very last decision is if the mayor's the CEO, we call him the CEO or her the CEO. At the end of the day, if they say we're not doing this, it stops the discussion. Alicia, what you're telling us is, no, that's a title. Just like in a company where the board says, no, this is what we voted to do. This is what's going to happen. And that title doesn't mean anything unless you give it the power to mean something. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the language in 1-301 of the city's code allows you to give your town administrator certain powers. Now, if you look at what is currently there versus what could be there, and that's why we sent you all the example from Mount Carmel to look at, there are things that you all could do to amend your code that would strengthen the position and the power and authority of a town administrator.
So
Again, go ahead, Derek.
So if the duties of the mayor, it says shall be the chief executive officer of the municipality. So that line means nothing. Is that what you're saying? That unless
No,
we
I think it
define
means
it to mean
something.
something.
I think it means something, but I also think that you have to read the charter as a whole. You can't just pick and choose sections of it to read. So if you read it as a whole, you will see that that language is there, but there's also language that says that the mayor is going to hold all of these authorities unless you delegate them to someone else.
Okay.
And once you delegate those to someone else, then that someone else then has all of those duties and responsibilities that have been clearly delegated.
Okay. So what does the chief executive officer actually mean then? Like, what does it mean?
Well, at this juncture, it means what y'all have said for it to me. So it means that the mayor holds all of those authorities and duties and responsibilities that have not been delegated to your town administrator. And that's what I'm saying. So you all have a lot of authority under that language that allows you to delegate responsibilities to the town administrator to fashion what the responsibilities of the mayor are going to be versus what the responsibilities of the town administrator are going to be.
Okay, so let's
And Bob,
look
if
at,
you think differently, please chime in. But that is my reading of the language in the charter and the language in the code.
That's absolutely my understanding. I think what everybody's trying to accomplish can be done by amending this one ordinance, 1301. And that chief executive language can be changed by ordinance too. I think that clause that's in there in 1307.
So what do you mean by that?
That's in the state code.
I'm talking about the clause we have in 1307 where we talk about the chief executive officer. That was put in at the time that ordinance was drafted. That wasn't drafted exactly from the charter.
But the chief executive officer language is included in the charter as well.
It is, but we made it stronger when we passed this ordinance, I think, and back in 2014. And that, what I'm saying is the ordinance can be changed. The delegation language is in there. I mean, the mayor can delegate all sorts of powers to the town administrator. I agree with you. The power is there if we do it. What the board needs to do.
Help me understand. So the mayor can delegate the powers to the TA, but what happens if the mayor doesn't want to delegate the powers to the TA?
Not the mayor delegating the powers, it's the board delegating the powers.
Okay, that's a really important part of what we're saying, because we keep saying if the mayor wants to, is our...
The board is in charge.
Okay.
The board, only the board can change the ordinance, not the mayor by himself.
Right.
And I guess going back to Scott, Jimmy had signed a letter delegating all the authorities to him, but we really should have done that through an ordinance. Right, Alicia?
Yeah, said something Scott came up.
One of the other questions Julie, I know that we're not covering the list of questions in order, but we've gone this direction, so I'm just going to go with it. So one of the questions that I've been wrestling with as I look at the systems is this, the committees and commissions. We know that the planning commission, only the mayor can appoint planning commissions. And this is true regardless of what system you're in, correct?
So no, that's not completely accurate. So if you look at the language in the statute that I've referenced in talking to you, what it says is that the appointments will be made this way. So the mayor or his or her designee will sit as an appointee. You all, as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, get to put an appointee on there, and then the rest of the members will be appointed by the mayor.
That's right.
Now,
And that's in either form of government, correct?
Right. That is state law.
That's
That is
state.
not something that is negotiable. That's in state law.
is that the same thing for the BZA?
No, the language in the statute related to the BZA says that the chief legislative body actually gets to make the determination as to how membership will be appointed on the BZA. So my assumption is at some point you all have passed something, an ordinance or a resolution that says this is how the appointees are going to be made, or the appointments are going to be made.
Tell me about.
That's been the way it's been done for 23 years. So I can't remember. There probably was a resolution or ordinance way back that did that. At one time, we only had a 3-person board, and the mayor, we didn't have a town administrator, so the mayor virtually ran the office and made those appointments. We'd have to do some research to see if there's actually a resolution or an ordinance.
One of the issues that we have suffered from is our current system breaks down in its efficiency when we don't have that TA in place. So how does the system balance itself? And Alicia, this is one of the questions I was asking you that you answered, but I want to get the chance to talk about it here. What do we do in the absence of a TA? What are the options that the Board of Aldermen has? Because the Board of Aldermen is who hires the TA. In the absence of a TA, does all the powers of the TA default to the mayor, or does the board, what do boards do when that happens?
What I would recommend to you in that situation is if you hire an administrator, one of the charges or responsibilities of that administrator is to have a succession plan in place for all the leadership of the city, police chief, fire chief, et cetera, et cetera. That would also apply to the city administrator, not in terms of a permanent succession, okay, but in terms of someone to fill in temporarily while the city recruits a new manager, the administrator. And a lot of instances, that administrator is leaving his or her own decision. They're going to retire, whatever the case may be. If there's the possibility of building in where they stay on for a fixed period of time while the city recruits a new administrator, that's ideal. It keeps everything running, brings a new administrator on, and you have the possibility of transition. If you don't go that route, then what I would suggest that you do, once you know the administrator is leaving, is that you advertise and hire temporarily a interim manager. And looking at old folks like myself, there's a lot of us out there that have been in the business for a long time. We've retired. So it's very possible to reach out and pick up an interim manager, someone that's retired, someone, to come in and serve for 3, 4, 5, 6 months while you recruit a new administrator.
Now, Mike, when you're doing that, is it the mayor that's doing that process, or is it?
No, everything is back to the full board.
See, we haven't been doing that right, and we probably need to do that.
When we make the change, which what you need to try and do, Wendy, is, and this is no reflection on anybody that's ever served as mayor, when you go to a professional city administrator structure operating, you need to have that continuity if something happens that the administrator leaves or whatever. Someone's got to be in position to step in. And again, it's no disrespect to anybody that's ever served as mayor, but being a town administrator is professional business. There's a lot of stuff that an individual needs to know to be able to do the quality job that the citizens of the city deserve. And so if you have a vacancy occur, then you need to either have a succession plan in place or, and I would stress that time and time again. In fact, if you grow up in terms of size to where you might have an assistant town administrator at some point in time in the future, that's an ideal way to go, because I stress that from the standpoint, no one knows what tomorrow brings. So you could lose your administrator in a disastrous 24 hours and go back to nobody unless you've got some kind of succession plan in place for someone to step up and fill in that position while you recruit and hire a new professional town administrator.
We, one of the other kind of things that we're wrestling with and that people have been asking me about is the issue right now, even in our current system, BOMA can put, like, any BOMA member can put anything. I just want to make this clear. We've said it. I want to make it clear. Any BOMA member can put anything they want on the agenda. They go through the town recorder to do that, correct?
Right.
And does whoever is in the seat of the mayor have the option of shortening or lengthening the meetings or changing the meeting structure without a majority vote?
I defer to Alicia on that legal question.
So I'm sorry, ask that again, Wendy.
Yeah, so, and I'm going to try to be really careful that I'm looking at systems, not people, not the way we do it. I'm trying to figure out our existing system and if we're using it properly and what we need to change. So this is part of the questions leading to that. If we, if the mayor says, like, say the mayor says for the next meeting, I don't want to have a meeting, or I want the meeting to only last 30 minutes long, and the rest of BOMA members are saying, no, we have all these things we need on the agenda and we need the meeting to last this long, then how does that decision get made? BOMA, a majority vote rules, right, on that? Or tell me how that works.
So you need to follow Robert's Rules of Order, because there's no procedural dictates in your charter, in your code related to meetings. So I looked at this issue this morning about how things get placed on agendas. So there's no language in y'all's charter or in your code that addresses that. So you would follow Robert's Rules of Order, which is interesting. I really couldn't find anything clear in Robert's rules except for under language related to new business either. So this really is as far as how things get placed on an agenda, that's really about what your practice is going to be, more than anything. So you all can set up rules related to the practice for getting things on an agenda are XYZ. So you have that authority. With regard to how long your meetings are going to last, if you have an agenda, then you have an agenda. If the meeting is going to be cut short, then you need to follow Robert's rules as far as how you go about adjourning a meeting. And that requires a motion and a second.
We have never adjourned a meeting without completing the agenda in my 15 years.
That's correct. And Wendy, I guess, Alicia, you just confirmed, I mean, any BOMA member can place an item on the agenda. But we need to set some rules up of how we need to get them on there, basically, because we don't have any rules right now. So we need to have something, if we wanted presented to Monteith a week in advance, but we need to set those rules and just go from there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting. Yes. And I think that can be the process that is being used. You all just need to decide, what is our practice going to look like as far as how we get items on the agenda?
And Alicia, I don't think this is totally unheard of. I'm aware of some cities where the boards adopt their own bylaws for how a meeting operates. And I don't know, our charter doesn't preclude that. I don't think that we could do that.
No, I think you could do that. I think you could just do a resolution that says this is what our practice is going to be as far as having rules related to how items are placed on an agenda, and put some time frames in there.
In our current system, it gives the mayor the power to call special meetings. That's not inherent in this system. That can be amended or changed if we want it, or is that part of the system?
That
Only-
language is in the charter, and that's not unique to just you all's charter. Most private act charters, the same thing. It says the same thing about who can call a special called meeting.
Typically, it would be the mayor or 2 or 3 board members having the authority to call a meeting. However, in either case, the agenda for that call meeting is whatever that call is made for. That's what you advertised it for, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, you can't get into the meeting and then bring up something else. Have to be strictly limited to what the call was for.
So I want to make sure that, like, even in our current system, if 3 older people said, we want to have a special meeting about X, then they could call a special meeting about X.
No, so that's not the way the language in the charter reads. The language in the charter says that the mayor may call a special called meeting of the board upon adequate notice to the board and adequate public notice. And that's in section 6-3-106 of you all's charter.
Okay.
Now, what
But I
can
think-
happen though, is that recommendations can be made to the mayor for the need for a special called meeting.
And I can't see any mayor, if he had a majority of board members wanting to call a meeting, not to call a meeting. I mean, I just can't.
No.
I can't see that.
Okay. I think if it's okay with everybody, can we go back to the list of questions just to make sure we cover the list that Julie had us put together?
Sure.
Okay. Everybody look at it, make sure that I'm not missing. Can you elaborate on any additional expense for the town in terms of staff time before, during, and after the proposed change? Direct expense to MTAS. This is if they change the charter. We're back to the question of changing the charter. Direct expense to MTAS for recodification, other consultants, and if passed, specialized attorneys, consultants to ensure legal compliance for a significant amount of time afterwards until ordinance has been reviewed. Wow, and operational changes made, any other direct and indirect costs you can think of. So basically, what's the cost involved in changing the charter, I think is what this question's asking. For MTAS or for the town?
So I can't speak to any direct cost as far as for us. I mean, it's not going to be, I don't know what any direct cost would be for us aside from, well, to you all because of work that we do. Mike, you've gone through or have seen charter changes before. Can you think of any cost associated with that?
Well, to update your municipal code, if you change your charter, then you're going to have to put that new charter in the code. And then at the same time, someone's going to need to go through and be sure that the terminology and everything in the code is compatible with the new charter. So there's going to be some expense there, but I can't see it being huge. I mean, you need, as soon as you can, if you adopt a new charter, as soon as you can, you need a fully accurate code of ordinances so that you're got full, complete direction and you're providing up-to-date and current information for citizens.
Yeah, and that's the concern I have, because our entire code over 23 years, we'd have to go back and look at everything and try and make the language consistent with the commission form. And you know, we use the code service. Does Tennessee Municipal League have a code service, or Monteith use the code, do our code?
Yes, I sent it to them and they help us codify things and
There's a
also,
pretty good lag time, isn't there?
yeah. Mhm.
I mean, it takes months and months and months. So if you change the system, our code's going to be outdated for, as far as the public, for 6 months, 8 months, whatever it takes.
Be a little bit of lag time there, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's my concern.
I don't understand how that's a concern. It's just part of the process. I mean,
Yeah, it'll be chaos for 6 or 8 months. That's my concern.
chaos.
Well, in the wrong ordinance, the wrong statute. Things just don't happen like that, Derek. I mean, it takes time.
Right. So
Code's slow. It's
a
blunt.
referendum process to change a charter then just shouldn't be done because it would be chaos for 6 to 8 months.
I don't think it needs to be done, but that's your call, the board's call, and your group's call.
You know, I've sat here and listened to all this, and it reminds me at the first of the year that we sat down and discussed this at a workshop. Everybody agreed to have a workshop. It never happened. The next thing we knew, we've got citizens wanting to throw a petition out there and change everything. I remember a board meeting where an alderman's trying to do the same thing that Wendy's doing right now to have a change and sit down and work the problems we're getting. Wendy's come up with a thing, change the ordinance that would do exactly what everybody's wanting. Put the powers where it's supposed to be able to help you get the people on the boards that you're wanting. And I'm still not hearing anything in an agreement with what MTAS is saying, and these two people are brought forth. This is the first real workshop we've had that sits down and spells the pros and cons of what we're doing. And I'm liking what I'm hearing as far as what Wendy's doing and the ordinance making a change to strengthen our charter, reword the charter, whatever it takes, and get the town on the right foot. Like Tommy tried to do one board meeting, and he finally had to pull it because listen. I'll pass it on to somebody else.
All right. When do you want to go on with the questions?
Wendy, you're on mute.
I was still waiting for costs too.
Okay, let's stay there. So when we talk about costs, is there any other costs that we need to be aware of? None?
I think it's hard to say because none of us have been through this except maybe the MTAS folks, but I don't think we know what the cost would be.
Well, and I can tell you, I've not been through it. I've not had a city who's done this since I've been at MTAS.
And I guess one of the questions that people have asked is the cost of any extra elections or anything else that we would need to do, anything like that that you're aware of that we need to talk about?
I guess Derek knows about that.
Yep. The initial referendum is negligible. It's like less than $1,000. And a special election, if the referendum passed, was estimated to be $12,000 range or a little less from the Election Commission.
Who covers the cost?
The 1,000 would be the citizens that are petitioning, but the special election would be covered by the town because the charter change passed. So the election would be held to fill the seats of the new charter.
Where did the $12,000 figure? Who gave you that, Derek? Like,
The Election Commission, Williamson County Election Commission.
Awesome. Okay, so at a minimum, and this is not an opinion. This is a question. At a minimum, $12,000, 13 if you count, but the 1,000 isn't the town. So at a minimum, $12,000 would be the cost of the town of Nolensville if we change the charter. Are there any other figures that we need to add to that? I mean, we talked about time and maybe we don't know how much extra like legal consulting or anything else that we would involve, but $12,000 minimum plus whatever else, anything else I'm forgetting? to add in there?
And I guess that's not counting the cost of the election commission to go through the 3,000 names to verify. But that would be on them, I guess. But that's that would be an additional cost to the system.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? Okay, then I don't even know who wrote Julie, I don't know who sent this email with all these questions, so I feel like I'm reading somebody else's questions, but I'm going to keep going. So part 2, adoption of charter. Does any of this apply to petition to change? And it says in 6-1-203, the incorporation petition, the petition shall include a plan of services setting forth the identification and projected timing of municipal services proposed, provided, and revenue from purely local sources to be payable annually. Question is then, if this applies to a petition to change, which revenue items are considered purely local sources? Does it include state shared revenue? Depending on the definition of purely local sources, the attachment to the petition may have included incorrect revenue amounts. I don't know whose question that was, so they may be able to speak to it a little bit better, but what can you tell us about that, Mike and Alicia?
So I'll take the next several questions, and I'll just tell you this. So part 2, all of this language is based on language in the general law mayor aldermanic charter. So none of this language will actually apply to the petition to change. This is all about incorporation. So all of those first questions down to the question related to surrender, this has no application if you all were to change your form of government or your charter type. So moving on to surrender, I don't know what the cash bond amount, how that would be calculated. That would be something that would have to come from your administrator of elections with probably the input of the division of elections. Again, I've never been through this process before, so I don't know how that would be calculated. Mike, are you familiar?
No, I'm not.
Okay. The next question related to termination. Territory previously unincorporated shall revert to that status. Another charter may be adopted. If all other necessary legal steps to adopt the other, I think that should be charter, have been taken. What are the necessary legal steps? What happens if another charter is not adopted at the same time? So it depends. So depending on the form of government that you actually adopt, what you will find, and I look specifically at the provisions related to the manager commission form of government. So there can be one petition that has 2 questions. Do you want to surrender your current form of government or your current charter? And do you want to adopt the manager commission form? You can do that all in one so that you would not have a lapse. Now, the problem becomes if you have both of those questions and somebody wants to separate the questions. I don't know how that works because it says that you can have both of those questions on the referendum ballot. So theoretically, there should not be a time when you would not have either the manager commission form of charter in place or the general law mayor aldermanic charter. Now, what the language in both of these sections do say is that you can automatically revert back to the charter that you had before the manager aldermanic form of government or the general law mayor aldermanic form of government was adopted. And I don't know what that was for Nolensville, if it was anything at all.
Alicia, so that was my understanding. There has to be 2 questions. There has to be a vote on surrender and the vote on adoption, a new one. I don't see any way around that. Do you?
No, there has to be 2 questions. Yes.
And I've talked to the state election folks, their legal counsel about the same thing. They're not exactly seeing it the same way, but it's also not their issue really. I mean, they're looking at the election issue per se, but they thought maybe you could just vote the city manager commission form in, and that replaces the old. But I think you got to do the surrender.
Yeah, I think you have to. My reading of the statute is that there has to be 2 questions, one on surrender and one on adoption of a new form.
So if people most of the time, if you're going to vote to surrender, you're going to vote to adopt. But if people got confused there's a risk in them getting confused and doing one and not doing the other, right? Like, tell me a case where people wouldn't vote yes to both of the, like, I know there's crazy things that could happen, but realistically, if they're going to choose one, they're going to choose the other, correct?
Not necessarily.
But we run a risk of people saying one and not the other, and then what happens? We lose, we revert back to our old, like, then what happens?
So it would be a reversion back to what was in. So if they voted to surrender the mayor aldermanic, the way I understand the language in the Tennessee code, if the vote was to surrender the general law mayor aldermanic, but the vote was then not to adopt whatever it was that the petition or the referendum read for adoption, then the surrender occurred. So you would revert back, the city would revert back to whatever form of government type of charter you had before the adoption of the general law mayor aldermanic.
And that was part of William County. There wasn't any other charter except it was part
of okay.
The unincorporated.
Unincorporated.
Okay. Are there anything else from this list before we start talking about the ordinance change or the ordinance, Derek?
Yeah, I was waiting for that discussion to end to throw in my expert legal opinion. The same state elections attorney that Bob was referencing, I spoke with as well, and many times actually for many hours about all of this. And there is no language anywhere about this process that says you have to surrender existing charter in order to adopt a new one. That does not exist. That is a choice to be made by the citizens. The citizens can petition specifically to surrender a charter. The citizens can also petition specifically to adopt a charter. Now there is language in here that makes references to adopting a charter while there is an existing charter in place. I have it pulled up on the screen. The same one, 6/18/107, secession to old corporation. Chapters 18 through 22 of this title shall take effect in any city immediately after the election and organization of the first Board of Commissioners provided for in this charter. And here it is. And thereupon, any then existing charter of such city shall immediately become abrogated and null. If it was not possible for there to be an existing charter when adopting a new one, then that line is absolutely unnecessary, because surrendering the charter means it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. But that line says the existing charter, if you've adopted a new one, is what it's implying. If you've adopted a new charter and there is an existing one, it is abrogated and null, meaning there is only one question required for the citizens to petition to adopt a new charter.
We looked at that. That's in the city manager commission code, I think. It's not in the mayor alderman. I don't think there's a similar clause in the mayor alderman type charter. Alicia, didn't we talk about that at one time?
I'm pretty sure we did, and I'm not familiar with that either.
It's not as clear as it sounds, and it's in a different charter form, and it doesn't directly address the surrender of a mayor aldermanic charter. And I talked with the state attorney on that too. She and I just disagreed on it. You'd have to look at it, but I don't see it being that clear. And this has not been done much. I don't know how many times in Tennessee local government's just changed its form of government just like that. I mean, it's I think a lot of these are unknown. But correct me if I'm wrong, Alicia.
Most of the changes have been with private acts.
Yeah. Through the legislature. Yeah.
Yes.
So before I move on, go ahead, Derek.
Any objections to the statement that it says, thereupon, any then existing charter of such city shall immediately become abrogated and null? That is unnecessary if it's not possible to only adopt while not also surrendering.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
what-
so Derek, this is my response to that.
Yeah.
So who did you talk to? Because I mean, I'm happy to call them and talk to them about it too. Who did you talk to in Division of Elections?
Beth Henry Robertson.
Okay, so I have a very good relationship with Beth, and I will
Yeah.
talk to her about it. But I will also point this out. So if you look at the charter that Nolensville actually has right now, Mayor Aldermanic General Law. If you look at the language in 6-1-303, where it talks about termination of this charter, it says that if a majority of the votes cast in the election are in favor of termination, it has when it will become effective. It says if before the adoption of this charter, the municipality functioned under a different charter, then that becomes effective again. It also says another charter, however, may be adopted, and the question on whether or not another charter shall be adopted may be placed on the ballot used in the election mentioned in this section, if the petition requests that, and if all other necessary legal steps to adopt the other charter have been taken. So that is why I am of the opinion that you have to have a vote on the termination, and then you also vote on the adoption of another form.
Hey, Derek, it looks like you had what you were reading a while ago, but you didn't put up what Alicia just read. Can you put that up?
Yep, it's up right now. 61303.
See, I think the one he's referring to is in the city manager commission form of government in their charter language, but we've got to deal with the one we've got. A charter just doesn't disappear in the air, you know.
No, it does. It does. It immediately becomes abrogated and null. That's why that's there. Again, the intent of the adoption language for the city manager commission charter is to make it as easy as possible for the citizens to follow this process. That it's everything that exists now transitions over to the new, and they would not require the citizens would be putting at risk their town if it's required to have a surrender and an adoption vote, which again makes no sense. The intent of that is to make it as easy as possible just to adopt with one question, have one adoption question. If it passes, the new charter takes over and there's an election for the government, and all of the debts and everything's transition over to the new charter. These interpretations that favor not having this referendum are disappointing to me, because
I appreciate your legal opinion, but that's what lawyers do. They give opinions, and you're looking for a quick and easy fix that I don't think's there, but I may be wrong.
Alicia, go ahead.
And so I just want to respond to what you just said, Derek. So MTAS is neutral in this, and I want that to be very clear. We are neutral in this. We were asked to come to the table and answer these questions for you all, and that's what we're doing. And we are not favoring one way, one position or the other on this. However, I have to deal with the language that's in your current charter, and that's what I'm dealing with.
I agree.
The language says what it says. And so it's not so, and like I told you, I am happy to call Beth. I will call her and we will have the conversation, and I will provide you all something in writing related to what that conversation is. But for purposes of this conversation, the language in the charter talks about termination, and then it talks about adoption of another charter.
The people are not petitioning to terminate our current charter. They do not want to do that. They're petitioning to adopt a new charter. There's language in that new charter that says if you're adopting a new charter and you have an existing one, the existing one becomes abrogated and null.
Okay.
I have to listen to the two attorneys we have on the line, Derek. I mean, I appreciate your opinion, but
the attorney he's talking to, she and I had that same debate. When I talked to her, she felt that his position was correct, but she wasn't absolutely sure. When I talked to her, it seemed, because I kept telling her about our current charter and what it says about surrender and termination, and the clause he's talking about is in city manager commission charter language, but it doesn't really specifically address converting a mayor alderman charter to a city manager commission form, and it doesn't really address surrender of a aldermanic charter.
Derek, is that where the language you're reading is? Is it in the city manager charter?
Yes.
It is.
618-107.
So it really doesn't have anything to do with our current mayor and automatic charter?
It says, I mean, I can read it again,
Doesn't say
but
But I'm asking you a question.
yeah,
The question
it has
is,
nothing to
it's
do with
in-
our current charter.
that's right.
So it is in the commissioner
City manager commission.
commission format. So to me, that answers your own question. It doesn't have anything to do with you can shake your head if you want to, but
So-
it doesn't have anything to do with our charter.
Right. So you're telling me if any existing city in the entire state of Tennessee wants to adopt, and they have a charter, and they want to adopt the city manager commission charter, the only way to do that is to risk losing your own town if it's a 41 or 49 and a 51 vote, and the adoption fails and the surrender succeeds, you lost your town. That's a risk if you want to try to adopt this charter, and you're being forced to surrender your old.
I think
the
that's
process.
probably the reason. I think that's probably the reason it very, very rarely happens, because there's
Okay.
that risk. I mean,
No, I mean if
I'm
that's
not an attorney, but I think you answered your own question.
if
You're
that's what
reading
our
something-
Tennessee state legislature, if that's the process that they established, again, very disappointed.
I understand the disappointment. I mean, I get it. It's kind of crazy that it is that way. And that you can risk everything trying to make the changes.
It's not that way. I think everybody in this call knows it's not that way, but we are where we are.
Well, I don't know it.
I actually don't. That's why I've been asking the questions, is trying to figure out how to keep that from happening. I also think there's probably ways that we communicate well to people so that it doesn't, if the citizens decide if they go this route, I'm sure there are ways to try to make sure that everybody understands how to do the process to minimize that risk. But it sounds like, only based on what I've read and heard here, that you can't entirely minimize all risk. So
I think what you're saying, Derek, is, to me, Alicia is a neutral party, an attorney who deals with this every day. I think you're saying her opinion really doesn't matter.
Not saying that at all. I definitely respect the effort and the opinion and everything that both Mike and Alicia have brought us here today. I can disagree with it.
But you made the comment, everybody on here knew that was the way it was supposed to be. And Wendy just says she doesn't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Very logical. It's a very common sense argument to say the state legislature does not require a town to risk its corporation status in order to adopt a new charter. And I know everybody hears that and you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But
what we're dealing with is what's in our charter.
Right, and the new charter has language for how to replace an existing charter, and so
But
we can
gotta-
talk. We
you
can
gotta
talk in circles.
surrender a charter before you have a new charter.
No, you
That's
don't.
what I'm understanding, Alicia.
No, you don't. It specifically says, why would this language be in the city manager commission charter, unless it was possible to adopt it with an existing charter. Thereupon, any existing charter of such city shall immediately become abrogated and null. That is unnecessary language.
I guess you could go from a city manager commission charter to a mayor and automatic charter without surrendering. That's what it's saying to me, but I'm not an attorney.
Okay.
Wow.
So you think the Tennessee State Legislature set it up? You can go from a CMC to the MAC, but you can't go from the MAC to the CMC without risking your town's corporation status.
That's what we've got Alicia and Mike and Bob on here for. I mean, that they're reading our charter. I'm I'm not an attorney. I don't have a clue.
You know, I'm not an attorney either, but we've got 3 fully qualified people here. And with the questions that Wendy's asked them, they've told us exactly how to correct this problem that we've got. And it's basically by resolution and ordinances. No, I don't know why we keep going back to this referendum thing when the problems that we've got in the town, the board can take care of.
Agreed, Larry. That
We all took an oath to take care of the charter for this town. And that's what we're trying to do. And as Tommy said in one of the meetings, if there's problems, we can work them out, we can fix it, and we can get it back where it's supposed to be. We can take care of the outdated stuff. But what I'm hearing is some that just don't want to listen. They want to find excuses and find other ways to ignore everything that's been said. When 3 fully qualified attorneys and the 2 from MTAS have sat here and spent their time telling us all we've got to do to get what we're wanting in the town, to get it fully functional and do what needs to be done is through resolution and ordinance change to the charter without all the other rigmarole that's been going on.
Okay,
I don't know where the problem lies in doing that.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Other stuff that's going on.
okay, let's transition then. And again, let's look at the ordinance that we passed on first reading the other night. Alicia and Bob gave some really good feedback on how there's, as I knew when I put it up the other night, I knew I was going to have to make some changes to it. I want to remind everybody, this is the citizens can keep trying to pass the charter. This isn't about that. At the very least, my plan is, how do we rebalance the power in our current system to make us more efficient and do a better job? And so I put up this amendment, and it doesn't mean that we haven't that we've done a poor job in the past. It means that we've grown, and what do we do now to try to rebalance this power? So Alicia, can you, everybody, if you've got up what I sent you from Alicia, and Derek, if you can put that up so people can see it. And let me give you a chance to all look at it, but it's the ordinance that we had from the other night with some changes that are in it. Alicia, can you kind of talk to the major changes, what I put need to be made?
Yes.
Hey, Wendy, I take issue with our poor job in the past. You need to clarify that if you can at some time, not necessarily now, but you used that before, and I certainly take issue with that.
Let me clarify it now because it's important.
No, it's not important. Let's go on to Alicia.
Okay, go ahead, Alicia.
Okay, so what I did was I took what Wendy had put together and what you all passed on first reading, and I made some, you can see in the first part in the whereases, I just made a few changes there. The substantive changes really come in the next section. So specifically with regard to the issue of making the appointments to the Planning Commission. So we've already talked about this somewhat, but I think it, just so that everybody hears it again for the second time. So the Planning Commission appointments are specifically set out, how those are to be made are specifically set out in state statute. So 13-4-101A of state statute of the Tennessee Code sets out how those appointments are to be made. So the language that is in paragraph 1 under section 1, that language will need to be amended. Like I said before, with regard to the appointments made to the BZA, those appointments, you all have the authority to control how those appointments are made. So you just need to find out if the board has passed a resolution or an ordinance in the past. And I did not see an ordinance, but it could be in your zoning ordinance. And I didn't look through that related to how those appointments are made. One of the other things, though, that I do want to point out, and let me see if I can change slides really quickly, is If you look at the language in 63106 of your charter, that is the section that sets out the duties of the mayor. So in it's 63106A, and then it's 7. It says the mayor shall make appointments to boards and commissions as authorized by law. So unless you did a charter change, that language is not going to change. Now, we already know how the law sets out the appointments to the board, to the planning commission. We know how the state law sets out the appointments to the BZA, but any other appointments that are made, the language in the charter specifically says that the mayor makes those appointments. Now, could you all have a process in place where you made suggestions to the mayor and then the mayor would ultimately make the decision on those appointments? I think you could have that process in place. But as far as who has that ultimate authority, currently that duty and responsibility and authority lies with the mayor. So that's the first thing that I had a comment about. The second thing that I had a comment about was the agenda, and we've talked about that already, just putting a process in place regarding what your appointments or how you are going to set up information that is on the agenda. The next thing that I have a comment about is so the authority with regard to personnel matters. So I read back through some of the conversation, or I asked Montique to send me some of the conversation that occurred related to the passage of this on first reading. And then I also just listening to the conversations today and some of the previous conversations that I've had related to this issue. And what was drafted was that the authority related to personnel matters were going to be made in cooperation with the mayor. Well, instead of in cooperation with the mayor and the entire board. Based on my understanding of what you all are trying to do, it seems to me that really what you want is for your town administrator to have the power to deal with personnel matters, period. As opposed to the town administrator also having to work with either the board or the mayor to make those decisions. Because the current language that you all have says that it will be done in cooperation with the mayor. So if you want to have your town administrator function in a manner where they can be most effective and make those personnel decisions on their own, then the language that has been suggested in what you all passed in first reading, I would suggest that you change that to where that individual has the power to recruit, hire, evaluate, and direct all personnel pursuant to your personnel policies. And then the final comment that I made with regard to what you all passed on first reading was in paragraph 4, where you have language that deals with where there's a conflict. I just think it needs to be clear that your charter is always going to prevail. Even if you have language in your code that says something different than what your charter allows for, the language in your charter is always going to prevail. And so the language here that says where there's a conflict provided by the language in the code versus what's in the charter, that the language in the code is going to prevail, that's not how the law works. So those were my comments on the ordinance.
What are the practical implications of that? Like that makes complete sense that the charter would prevail. This is a question for everybody, not just Mike and Alicia. What are the practical implications of that? that we would run into or that we've run into. Does my question make sense? If there's not any practical, I mean, if it doesn't make any difference, then I won't worry about it. But if there's something that we can anticipate, because here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that when we make decisions, that there's not one person always that's able to, like, that the mayor doesn't have the power to override decisions made by BOMA ultimately. That's not our mayor, that's any mayor. I'm trying to work on the system that will be there after all of us are long gone. So there's a couple things that we're trying to do here in doing that. One is to make it so the TA has the power to do their job, right? And so sounds like the way that we set this up gives the TA, with the suggestions that you're making, Alicia, that it lets the TA do their job and they cannot be overridden by any mayor, correct? Like without all of BOMA's, or without a majority of BOMA agreeing, correct?
So there would have to be an additional step in the process put in place in order for that to happen. If you just left the language at what has been suggested, what I suggested, then unless you all put in some kind of appeal process or grievance process, once that decision was made, the only way that would ever be overturned at that point is if a court overturned it, unless you put some type of additional grievance process in place. And I am not suggesting that at all.
Okay. The other thing that's pretty big to what you said is, in our current system, something that when people call it a strong mayor system, something that makes it a strong mayor system is the idea that the mayor picks every person for every committee and every commission. I was hoping there is a way to balance that power out. But Alicia, are you saying that the charter is saying that the power for that, for all committees and commissions, goes to the mayor, or we can't, and sure, BOMA can make suggestions, but at the end of the day, if whoever's in the mayor's seat says, yeah, thank you for the suggestions, but I'm going to fill the trees and trails committees with only my appointments, and I'm going to fill the budget committee with only my appointments, and I'm going to fill and that's the way it is. There's no check on that, or
there's no check on that. So the language in your charter in 6-3-106-7 says the mayor shall make appointments to boards and commissions as authorized by law. So unless there is something in state law that sets up a different appointment process, then the mayor has the authority to make those appointments. Now, and again, I will say, generally how I have seen this work in the cities that I work with is that recommendations will be asked for, and then there will be some consideration of those recommendations when those appointments are made.
And Bob in the past hadn't, I mean, pretty much when Jimmy makes a recommendation for BZA or historic zoning, he'd always brought a person to the board and they just kind of voted on it by acclamation.
Yeah, traditionally it was not a big issue. Traditionally,
I say Jimmy, I meant to say mayor. I'm sorry.
Yeah, traditionally the mayor would make a selection, and then at a board meeting it'd be an agenda item, announcement of new PC member or whatever. And generally the board went along with that. I mean, over 23 years, that's generally the way it was. It's just in the last couple of years that it's become such a hot topic.
But I think it's important to remember that when it comes to planning commission, the mayor has the authority based on the language in the Tennessee Code, with the exception of that one member that the board gets to make the appointment for.
That's the one. Yeah, that one's statutory. Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. But the board can still give him recommendations, but it's ultimately the mayor's decision.
Yeah.
Regardless of what system for the planning commission.
But wait, isn't that what you're saying now? That's true of all committees?
Not BZA. I think BZA maybe allows for the BOMA to make the selection. I'd have to go look at that, but I think that's the case under state statute.
Well, it says the chief legislative body sets up the process for making the appointments.
Process.
So
okay.
it's based on how you all have decided in the past that those appointments will be made.
Okay. At the risk of sounding really thick-skulled, and that is true, let me make sure, because this is important that I understand this. So for Trees and Trails, Budget Committee, all of those committees, those are appointed, ultimately appointed at the pleasure of the mayor
That's what the language in your charter says, yes.
in our charter. And can we amend that?
Yes, you can do an amendment to the charter.
And so in the amendment that I'm proposing, is it effectively changing that so that those appointments are made by, okay, so, but we can do it, and I just need to rewrite this in a way that it,
No, so rewriting this ordinance is not going to change that.
okay, so sounds like then I need to put up a new ordinance if I want to change that, correct?
Well, actually, if you look at section 6-3-106, you will see that subsection B is where the language in the charter allows you to delegate all of those things that are set out in subsection B to someone other than the mayor. But everything in subsection A, those are the powers and duties of the mayor. And so the ability to make the appointment to boards and commissions, that's in subsection A. So that's not in that section where you can delegate that away. And that's why I said that if you wanted to do something different about that, that's going to take a charter change.
Do you understand kind of why I'm confused a little bit there?
So are you, it might be helpful to actually look at this section. Are you looking at 63106?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything you see there, that everything in subsection A. So those are strictly duties of the mayor. And then you get down to the language in subsection B, where it says, unless otherwise designated by the board by ordinance, the mayor shall perform the following duties or may designate a department head or department heads to perform any of the following. And those are the ones that you can actually delegate, can be delegated to someone else, or the board can pass an ordinance that delegates those. But it is those that are in subsection B that can be delegated.
Okay, let's take what I've proposed off the table. And before you saw that, you had something that you wanted us to try that could substitute instead of a charter change and kind of get done what we're wanting to do. Why don't you tell us about that?
And so Mike can speak more to this, but I'm assuming that you're talking about the language from Mount Carmel.
Yes.
And so I want to be clear that this is not something that we are suggesting that you do, but we did want you to see this as a possible option.
Okay.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
So if you want to talk through, Mike, the language that you sent them or that was sent to them from Mount Carmel.
What's the question on that language?
Well, I don't think there was a question. It was just more about the suggestion that's being, or the language that has been sent to them and what this does. Because Wendy said if we took what she had drafted and what has been passed on first reading off the table, which I don't think is necessary. Let me just say that. I don't think that's necessary because one of the other things that I looked at this morning is after we have this conversation and you all talk about this and whether or not you want to even take into consideration the suggestions that I placed in what has been passed on first consideration. If there are things that you want to take out and add based on what you're looking at from Mount Carmel, we can do that. And it does not require the board to go back and to pass something new. That amendment can be made. And what I looked at this morning was the case law on making amendments to proposed ordinances between first and second reading. And as long as the topic is still the same, that can happen. So it would not require you to take this off the table to pass something new. It would just, you could just amend what you've already passed on first reading.
Okay, that's good.
One of the things to pay particular attention to on Mount Carmel is, as compared to your all's current provisions on the city administrator, it talks in terms of the administrator's interactions, recommendations, information, et cetera, is going to the board of mayor and alderman. Okay. Your all's current charter or current code reads going to the mayor and the board. So this is incorporating the mayor into the board in terms of that interaction. Understand what I'm saying?
You're talking about item 6? Mike, you're referring to item 6 on.
Well, out of item 6 or any of those other items up through there, where it says item, going back to item 2, make recommendations to the board of mayor and alderman. 3, keep the board of mayor and alderman fully. 4, report to the board of mayor and alderman. 5, recommend to the board of mayor and alderman. 6, recommend personnel positions to the board of mayor and alderman. All of those are set up to deal with the full board. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then down on item 9 is, standard wording, employee, promote, discipline, suspend, et cetera, with personnel policies and procedures adopted by the board. So the board setting the standards and directions in that regard. And again, perform such other duties as may from time to time be designated or required by the board.
Yeah, I love just reading through the what's the town Mount Carmel
Yes.
example ordinance. I think it's perfect. I would follow that one verbatim. If did you say Elisha, it's possible to amend our current ordinance to follow that one? Okay. You were muted, but I read your lips. You said yes. Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yes, because the substance is not that different. Because basically what you all had passed on first reading was to provide some additional duties to the town administrator. And so the topic is still the same, while the substance may be a little different. A lot of this is in line with what you all had already talked about and passed on first reading. And I think the case law supports just being able to amend between readings the ordinance.
And that would be basically, in essence, going back and amending that full section in your current charter on the city administrator.
Well, amending the section in your current code. So it's 1-3, the
Well, that's
section
what I'm saying.
1-301. Mhm.
But amending, not just addressing the employment aspect, but amending the total codes
Can I ask?
or total code chapter.
Can I ask a loaded question without it trying to be a loaded question? So if we adopt, if we make these changes to make ours more similar to Mount Carmel, at the end of this, what are still the issues left on the table that would make an argument for a charter change? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Derek. I don't mean to make you the poster child, but yeah, I would like to ask you.
Yeah, for me, every decision, all the power, responsibility, and decisions that are focused on one person now are guaranteed to be delegated across a board equally. That's, I mean, the appointments of committees is a big one, minus the planning commission. But the mayoral seat, which would be appointed by the board, by the commissioners, the board of commissioners, could change every 2 years. So it just puts more, checks and balances there on that seat.
Okay. So the main, like, those are the biggest things. The how the mayor gets appointed would change, and also the committees and commissions minus planning commit. We're going to take that out. Just put that aside. We all know now where that stands. That's the other thing that this doesn't control for. This meaning the ordinance wouldn't control for. Correct?
I kind of lost what the question was, but it sounded correct.
Okay. You want me to try it again?
Sure.
I'm just trying to clarify. So if we adopt the ordinance with the changes to make it similar to Mount Carmel, we still don't. This is what the charter change would have, that the ordinance would not have. Goodness, words are hard today. Is that it wouldn't change how the mayor was appointed. So the charter change would mean that BOMA appoints the mayor, and that could happen every 2 years. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second thing is that it wouldn't do is change how the committees were appointed. And is that correct?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? This is for Alicia and Mike, I guess, and for anybody else. Under the charter, under 6-3-106, under B5, or number 5, I guess, the last line before 6-3-107, where it says the mayor, such other duties as may be designated or required by the board. Could you not say the board required the mayor to allow the alder people to submit and appoint committees? Is that, or am I just way out in left field like I usually am?
Yeah, I just don't know that language gets you there because of the language in subsection A where it specifically says that is a duty of the mayor.
Yeah.
Bob, what do you think?
I'm of the same opinion.
So what would that line actually mean?
That
So I think it means exactly what you all have done. So if you look at what Mount Carmel has, and then you look at what you all currently have in place in y'all's 1-301, you have a lot of things in 1-301 that Mount Carmel does not have.
That's right.
But what you don't have are any of those things that are listed in subsection A under the duties of the town administrator.
so we could put in there that the town administrator is responsible for representing the town at regional meetings, like something that is not specified under subsection A, the mayor's duties. We're free to delegate or assign those duties to a town administrator via
I
ordinance.
think you could do a lot, yes, as long as it's not otherwise mandated or required by law. And you've done that. I mean, like I said, if you look at what you currently have, you have a lot of things in there that are not covered in what we sent you from Mount Carmel.
Right.
It's just there has to be a town administrator to carry them out, and that's the weakness. I think getting a new town administrator is going to be difficult while everything's in a state of flux. Because I from me knowing town administrators and managers in the past, they want to know what the ordinances are they're working under. They need to know. And I applaud Wendy for trying to make this change, because I think it's going to make that process easier.
Agree with you, Bob, and we should make all levels issues known to any applicant for
Yeah.
town administrator up
Yeah.
front.
Yes.
And well, just to speak on that, the contract with the town administrator would persist through a charter change. So their role, their duties, none of that would change unless if the referendum passed and there was a new commission elected, they would have to change via ordinance or vote to terminate the contract of a town administrator. So the charter is irrelevant. It's these duties of the town administrator that are the relevant piece.
Mike and Alicia, do most other towns for the town administrator have a contract?
A lot of cities have a contract, Tommy, but the primary purpose, my view in terms of primary purpose of contract, is a severance provision that, because we're an at-will state, okay? So what you're doing in that contract, in a lot of those contracts, is you're providing a fixed amount of payment, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, after termination. Because if you hire a professional manager, they're not going to be able to walk down the street and get another job. They're going to have to move out of Nolensville, maybe even out of Tennessee, in finding another good city manager's position or city administrator's position. That doesn't happen overnight. That takes some time to put all that together. And so part of the reason for that severance package, yes, you can terminate me, but you'll pay me for 3 months or 5 months or whatever that you can agree to while I'm job hunting. And that's the primary purpose of the contract, at least in my perspective.
The key in either system is having a good town administrator.
Without question.
I mean, the mayor's only got one vote in everything we do regardless.
True.
As far as passing laws, ordinances, resolutions. He's just got one vote like everybody else.
The whole question is who's managing the city.
Yeah, well, and so that gets us to two other points that I think are important to, well, one I've already made, but I want to make again. And one was a question that Wendy had sent me in another email about veto power. And the language in you all's charter does not have language related to veto in it.
Right.
So I think that needs to be made clear. And then also, yes, having a good town administrator is important, but having a clear delineation of duties is even more important.
Right. I agree.
Mhm.
Tell me about in a manager commission system, how it works. You know, as we think to that system, how does it work when does the process move slower? Even if you have like, assume in both systems you have a great TA, in that system, does it make any difference in like if you have multiple people and don't have a mayor, kind of a like our system? Does it make the process move slower? That's probably a question for you, Mike.
Well, as I said earlier, if we were amending the code, the interaction between the manager or administrator and the mayor and board should all be folded back into the full board. So the administrator is not having to keep two entities, i.e. the mayor, i.e. the board, fully abreast of everything's going on. He's keeping one entity, the board, mayor, and alderman, fully abreast of everything that is taking place. And that is that's just basics. It's just fundamental in that regard. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask kind of a question. In a commission manager or manager commission form of government, when they don't have a town administrator or whatever you want to call him, who's in charge?
The full board is in charge and would have the responsibility of appointing someone to fill that administrative role until a new administrator could be hired. But the full board of mayor and alderman would be in charge.
And that's what the language in that charter says. It specifically says that during the absence or disability of the city manager, the board of commissioners may designate some properly qualified person to perform the functions of the city manager.
So the board of mayor and alderman could actually do the same thing as a temporary role.
What do you mean?
Appoint or hire somebody in a temporary role that the city commission form of government would do.
Yes, we would need, it would be best if that was distinctly clarified in your municipal code.
So let me take it one step further, I guess. In a commission form of government, until they hired someone or found someone or appointed someone, then all 5 people would have to make a decision. If for on an employee, on a major crisis, on what would be the default in a manager commission form of government if there's a crisis without a town manager?
They wouldn't go very long without appointing someone, Tommy, to fill or serve in that capacity, in that role, because you can't have 5 individuals.
A snake doesn't have 5 heads, does it?
Right, maybe all working full-time jobs trying to run the city's day-to-day operations.
You know, I worked for a city once that had a commission manager form of government, and the city manager resigned, and the board had a commission had a special meeting to appoint a retired city manager in the interim. That's what happened there.
Right. That is where that's possible. Bob, that happens a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because you have someone that can basically hit the ground running, so to speak, in terms of just coming in cold and doing the work.
I guess what I'm hearing through all of this and through the conversation is that if we took the recommendations that you all presented to us today and applied those to the charter we've got right now, made the changes that Wendy's got, the TA change, made the resolution changes, the ordinance changes, the rewording and stuff, that would be the best alternative for the town at this time, without going through trying to do a change and not knowing what the unknown is and what the possible cost of loss of income or anything like that would be to the town. I'm trying to put my head around this, but I'm saying that what you're saying is that there's nothing wrong with our charter other than just updating it, putting the wording in there for the administrator, the duties, the appointments, everything that's been brought up through the questions today. Am I wrong in what I'm saying?
I think it depends on what outcome you're searching for, right? If your outcome is, I think if you pass the ordinance and change the position of the town administrator and give them the power to do their job, you for certain have improved our efficiency, improved the distribution of power. You're going to make town hall run better. We're going to get better candidates. So that doesn't mean that it's not doing a good job. It just means we haven't had a town administrator. It gives us a town administrator, gives them the power to do their job. At the very least, we accomplished that. If you want a system, if you're worried about a system where there's a lot of power in one person's hands to appoint every single committee member and commission member, it does not take care of that. So if that is a concern, and if addressing that is worth the expense and the risk of changing the charter, that's something the citizens have to decide.
Can I ask a question on that? What committee person or committee that someone's recommended has not got appointed? I mean, I think the last committee we started back up was the Economic Development Committee. Didn't the mayor pretty much appoint every recommendation that was made for that committee?
Well, I'm trying to be really careful to not talk about the way we've done things.
I understand, but I was just.
Itself. And so they're not required to. We're not worried about how we've done it. We're worried about setting up a system regardless of what happens. And if in the future that person doesn't want to take the recommendations, the way our system is set up, the way we've written it, they don't have to. And so that's what we've got to try to figure out.
That's true. But that's what elections are for also.
I'm going to step it up one. You talked about town administrator. I'm not saying that. We've had a town administrator and went through, and it was a learning, the first one. The second one didn't last very long. But I am all for having a town administrator to do what has to be done. That's what the town administrator's duties are, is to take some of the load off the mayor, and the duties that he has is to run the town. I'm all for that. I'm talking about these other things, the committees and stuff. I think this workshop's the worst thing. Meeting them here is probably the best thing we could have done, because we understand where the problems are at and it's something we can work at. But no, as far as town administrator, I'm all for what that MTS proposed to us. Yeah, I'd love to see that in our ordinance for the charter. That would help a whole lot. Place the responsibilities and stuff, and what people that were coming to work here or people who work here know where it's coming from. I have no problems with that whatsoever. I just want to fix the charter we've got right now, and everybody agree with it and do what we think's right. I don't think throwing it out the door and a coup taking over and trying to run the town is not the way to do it. I think we take the charter we've got, the information we've got today, work with it, put it into ordinances, into resolutions, and I think the whole board together can work it out.
A couple things. You asked the question, Tommy, so I'll answer. There were a couple changes to the first pass of the EDC recommended members. But Larry, to describe a charter change as a coup is just not correct. I have been very clear that the reason why I support the citizens' effort to change the charter is I personally think it is a better system. It is the exact system I think would best serve Nolensville moving forward in the future. It is not about any one person. I have been as clear about that from day one when I got involved with this thing, and I don't appreciate it being categorized as a coup.
Well, I'm going to put this question to you. With what you've heard here today, what do you find wrong with what they've said by making the changes to our current charter? What is wrong with adding the information that they've given us? We go back and change the ordinance and putting resolutions and stuff in. That will make our charter strong. What is wrong with doing that?
Absolutely nothing, and I support doing that, and hope that's the direction we continue to go. But the petition for the referendum to adopt a new charter can and will probably continue regardless of if we make any changes to our current town administrator duties. That's a citizen-led effort.
But there are, I think you will admit, there are risks with the citizens-led effort financially and to our incorporation.
Yes, Tommy, you're right. Adequate facilities tax laws.
Alicia, how does cities with the mayor, alderman, well, and Mike, you probably can answer this too. How do cities with the mayor aldermanic system currently handle? I know like Hendersonville, other than some of the standing committees, BOMA appoints committee members. I think Laverne is another one. What's your experience with how they handle committees and commission appointments in other mayor aldermanic systems?
I don't know the details of that. I can't answer
Okay.
that. I mean, I can ask some of my city attorneys and find that out, but
I would have to do some checking on that also, Wendy. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. One thing that you all might give consideration to, and that is letting us draft an ordinance to amend your municipal code along the lines of what we've discussed. If you decide to pass that ordinance, go ahead and pass it. And that's not stopping the citizen effort, but maybe they might pause for a little while just to see how the new change works. And if it's satisfactory, then they're happy. If it's not satisfactory, then they may want to continue on. But that would be one reason to try and go ahead with an ordinance now.
Well, that's why I put this one up the other night. That's why I put this ordinance up, is trying to do something sooner than later and to go ahead and give us the chance to see how this works. If it does work, if it does take care of some of the questions that we want to have.
I would just suggest when you give us a chance to draw a more comprehensive.
Mike, I would love that idea.
Pardon?
I would love for you to do that. I don't know what the rest of them feel, but I would love to see you. I would love to see you do that.
This kind of conflicts with what we were saying earlier, because earlier we were saying we could just use what I've written because it's already gone through first reading and tweak it. And now we're saying throw it out and start again. Which way do we want to go?
I don't think that's what they're saying. I think what you draft could be the replacement of hers for second reading. It's basically the same caption, the same ordinance. It's just changed content-wise. You can do
I just
that on.
lose a month. I don't want to lose that extra meeting time that would take.
I don't think it loses a month. It depends how long it would take them to draft something.
When's your next
We're
meeting?
not having BOMA again till May, first week of May.
I think we could have something ready by then, don't you, Alicia?
If I understand what you're doing, the draft would include pretty much the ideas that Wendy already has brought forth and just fine tunes them with some of the comments you've made. Is that right?
Well, yeah, what I'm suggesting, Bob, for example, to go back in and look at that section of your code dealing with city administrator, that chapter. And as I spoke earlier, the references between the administrator and the board incorporate, as Mount Carmel did, incorporate the mayor into the board. As it reads now, it's keep the mayor and board fully advised. This would be to keep the board fully advised, the mayor being a part of that board. And that would touch on each and every aspect where it separates those. We'd put them back together.
This is not trying to sidetrack us too much, but it's been in my head that I wanted to ask this. So if we pass this and we have a town administrator, I know with Scott Collins, he said ultimately he doesn't really use, when we had him, he didn't want to use a budget committee. He wanted to prepare the budget. BOMA passed the budget that he brought. Our charter's written, so that's done in consultation with the mayor. Tell me about how the budget system works, in that process.
Well, we did.
Mayor, you're cutting out.
Committee this year, if I remember correctly. We didn't have a budget committee last year. I think it was Ken's call to eliminate the budget committee. And again, Ken was never restricted what he pretty much wanted to.
So going forward if we have the TA operating not independently, then it would be the TA's call on whether they used a budget committee or not.
If I understand it from what Mike and says, that it would be a BOMA call as to whether we had a budget committee.
Is that right, Mike?
I would think so. I'm trying to find the provisions in the code to set that out.
That could also be how we wrote or amended the ordinance for the town administrator, isn't it? I mean, if the town administrator, it's written that he makes and presents a budget, then we wouldn't have a budget committee.
Well, and that's what the language actually says. So going back to 6-3-106 in subsection B, those powers that can be delegated, preparing and submitting the annual budget and capital program to the board for their adoption by ordinance is one of those duties that can be delegated to the town administrator. Now, whether or not a board was using that, a committee was using that process or not, that language exists where that delegation can be made to the town administrator.
What about, one thing I've been trying to do is to take like all the different things, like all the different systems, if we make 0 changes, if we make the change with the town administrator, if we go to a manager commission and put different scenarios up against each system to see how they would play out. And so one of those is in the selection of a TA, if BOMA decides that they want to appoint a citizens committee to choose a new TA, they can do that, correct? If the majority, we haven't explored that, so that's not a criticism of what we've done. It is a question about how the system would operate. So if the majority said instead of like, we want a citizen, I know Fairview, for example, did that because I watched their meeting where they were doing that. If BOMA decided that's how that would work.
So that's a process that you all would have to work out between yourselves. Again, because the language in your current charter says that the mayor makes appointments to boards and committees. So you all would have to come to an agreement about that. Now, if you all could come to an agreement about that and you wanted to do that, that's fine, because ultimately, whether it's in manager commission or if it's in general law, mayor automatic, the board makes the appointment of the city manager or of the town administrator. Now,
Right,
what
that's
that
why I
process
wondered.
looks like, that's where you all would have to come to an agreement about, because of the language that's currently in the mayor aldermanic charter.
That's why I wonder, because since that's a board decision, that's a committee that would operate at the discretion of the board instead of being like a general town committee. That would be just a committee that if the board said we want some input from citizens, and if you had a person who said, if you had a mayor in place that said, no, I don't want to do that, does that end the discussion if the mayor says I don't want to do that, or does the board say no, the majority of us wants to? And again, this isn't something we've wrestled with so far, but I'm trying to figure out any system, what we're doing and how it would work. So if the board decided to put together a citizens group, because that process of hiring a town administrator is complicated and it's done by the board, right? Not by the mayor in our current system, correct?
It is done by the board. That's correct.
And I think if the board wanted to delegate that recruitment process out to committee or to a professional business that does recruiting, that would be a decision they could make.
Yeah, MTAS actually recommends a citizen advisory committee is an option to be, to help find a town administrator.
Yeah, right.
It'd be tough to find a group of citizens that would be qualified to pick a town administrator. I could see a problem with that.
Well, they would be providing more like recommendations to the board, and the decision would ultimately fall to BOMA to pick from their recommendations.
It would be the board's responsibility to interview and make that final decision, but all the recruiting and winnowing down the number to the top candidates could be done by committee.
So are we?
Tommy, unmute you.
You're muted, Tommy.
All right. I guess changing gears and going back. Are you gonna find out how some other Hendersonville, Laverne, Spring Hill, how they appoint their committees or commission?
Yes, I have some cities that are written. I actually, while we were having that discussion, I went and looked at all the cities that that are mayor aldermanic and wrote down some cities that I can just email quickly and ask their city attorneys how they make those appointments, and I can get back to you on that.
That'd be some great information.
To go back to what Mike said a while ago about drafting something, Wendy, it's not to throw anything that you've got out the window because it's been passed on first agenda on the first reading. But again, I'm in favor of what he's suggesting. It would give us something to look at. I mean, if we like it, we like it. If we don't, we go to public reading, hearing with yours, and then go from there. But I would like to see what he has, what they can come up with. If you've got no problems with it.
No, please, yeah, help me. Let's get the best version of it we can in there.
I want to do what's right for the town. I mean, I don't want to throw away 23 years of work that's been done in the town. If it's just going to take a few changes to the charter we've got right now to strengthen it, what you've recommended and what the board's recommended, if that's what it takes, that's what I want to look at.
again, it's not fair to try to categorize the citizens' effort to change the charter as throwing away 23 years. It's just an unfair mischaracterization there.
I'm sorry you look at it that way. But it still comes down to what we've been told today, that the only things that we've got to do to strengthen the charter we've got is through resolutions and ordinances and maybe some word changes and stuff to continue operating and making stuff strong. I don't see where going out and trying to change it when the board can sit here and agree to rewrite ordinances or write resolutions, or work with what Wendy's proposed or what MTAS has proposed without going through all this other stuff.
In any situation, I think you're better to try to fix what you've got if you can get close to the ultimate goal than to go out and try to restart or change. I mean, that goes with an employee, that goes with a marriage, that goes with, I don't know. I mean, I just think that you're a whole lot better off to try to improve and make better what you've already got than to start over with there's risk and unknowns, and they could be financial risk. I think you're much better off to try to fix what we've got, and I've said that all along. And
I agree, but it's only it doesn't work unless we show that it fixes what we've got, and by fix, I mean that we redistribute power. We make it so that people can get anything they want, like the people, meaning BOMA, that BOMA can get what they want on the agendas, that our communication to the town is improved, that we can hire an excellent TA, and that the TA can do their job. Like, if we don't do that, but if we pass this, then we've got to show that it works. And I think we're ready to. I think we're going to, but we need time to do that.
I agree with you 100% on it.
Me too.
Hey, Wendy, at our first work session,
When his statements that doesn't work.
all right, go ahead, Derek.
at our first work session, Wendy, you read some language that I'm pretty sure it came from MTAS, and said something to the effect of, it's not uncommon, it's recommended, something to that effect, that growing towns change from the strong mayor system to a commission style. Wasn't there something from MTAS?
It was actually in the, sorry. Elected Officials Academy book, where I found
20 years.
Say that, Mayor, you're cutting out. Can you say that again?
How many towns have done that in the last 20 years in this area that we know about?
I don't know of any. I don't know of any. Mike, so do you know of any?
One of the biggest trip points or limitations you get into with strong mayor form of government, as the city grows, complexity of operations grow. If you're still trying to manage that with a part-time mayor, that's a challenge. And a lot of towns will elect a mayor who has a full-time job. That's where they're making their living. Or maybe they're running a business. That's where they're making their living. They're not making their living being mayor because they may not get reelected. And so you get into a situation where in those size cities, being able to have somebody on board full-time handling day-to-day administration and operations is a challenge with a strong mayor system. and those cities over time drift away from being a strong mayor and going to a council manager or something of that nature, or they may in turn wind up hiring a chief operating officer who handles the day-to-day operations and reports directly to the mayor. In other words, the mayor is still strong mayor, but they're not there on a day-to-day basis. Somebody else is managing.
What you're saying, Mike and Derek, back to what you're asking, Sue, this is what in task, this is what's in the, this is the wording. As cities became increasingly urbanized, the weak and strong mayor forms, mostly political in nature, seemed incapable of responding to the growing urban population and demands for increased services. And there was a sweeping movement away from political forms towards administrative forms, which is what we're doing by giving the TA more power, is moving towards a more administrative. It doesn't require, this isn't saying you necessarily need to change your charter, but that we move to giving an administrator more power.
Which is what we done in 2014 or 15 when we first hired the first town administrator, which didn't work too good. But that's what we're trying to fix, to give him all the power that he needs to do the day-to-day operations with hiring and firing.
And I'm all in favor of that if that's what it takes to now back, bring it back up to the, let's call it the new age. I mean, we've got one, our charter's 23 years old. It may be, it does need time to be changed. And that's what we're meeting for today. Mike's made a good point. Wendy's come up with a lot of good stuff. It goes back to what I said. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with and taking a look at it. I'm thinking that the whole board needs to work together on this. And it's like Mike said, it may be something that everybody will stand back and take a look at it and give us a shot at. If it's written the way I think it's going to be written, everybody will stand back and give us a chance to see how it works. And Wendy, for the committees and stuff like that, that's something that the board can work out as far as wording and stuff between ourselves, as far as appointments and stuff, or how who's in charge of them and stuff like that. But there's 5 people that can make these recommendations and make these changes if we work together without tearing up stuff or messing with stuff. Let's renew it. Let's get it right.
Do you want us to proceed with putting together a draft?
Well, that's up to the majority. I personally would love to see one.
Same.
It's Wendy's amendment, but I think that's what she was wanting. Wendy?
Yeah.
Wendy, I don't see us causing any delay. I think it becomes your ordinance on second reading as amended.
At the very least, at the end of this, I'm excited that we're going to get the TA set up to come. We're going to be able to hire a better TA and make it so that they can do their job effectively. And we got to find a great TA. So at the very least, yes, please, MTAS, help us. Mayor, what you're shaking your head?
Well, I think it's going to be.
He's breaking up.
But we've got, okay, we're going to try Saturday, but more candidates that have come in, and some of them make better candidates. But I'm in agreement with pretty much what's been said.
Okay, well, it sounds like we can pursue that then.
Well, I think we're scheduled to pursue it Saturday.
Yeah.
Are we about to wrap up? I guess do we need to get some final comments from anybody? Or I certainly want to thank Alicia and Mike for your time today and all you do for MTAS. We certainly look to y'all for for guidance as a town, as all other small towns look for MTAS for guidance. And I just appreciate that. I want to say I thank y'all for y'all's non-biased relationship and advice. And I just want to thank y'all for your time.
I'm going to echo what Tommy said. I'm looking forward to this. This has been a big help to me in learning a lot of this stuff. And I appreciate both of y'all spending your morning with us and helping us out and answering a lot of questions.
I agree with that totally. It was very nice y'all spend your time with us, and I hope we all learned something.
Derek,
Yes, thank you.
same. Thank you.
Thank
I
you for this
appreciate
2.5 hour meeting.
it. Yeah.
And let me just say one other thing. I guess it looks like the committees is really the only difference of the two forms of government. When we pass the ordinance for the administration, town administrator, is that what everybody else sees, or am I totally out in left field?
No, I think you're right, Tommy. And like I said earlier, I believe there's 5 people that's here on the screen today, including the town attorney and Monique, and all of us. That's something we can work out between all of us. I mean, there's nothing that it's something that everybody can work out.
Yeah, I think committees is a big deal to me, and I'm still going to be thinking through that. And I'm going to look to see how other towns who have mayor aldermanic systems work through that. I want to make some phone calls and actually talk to people working in those systems to see what they do about that. But I think what we've got here and the changes we're going to make here are good ones.
And the form of government we got, it works for towns that are 5 times larger than we are. So they figured it out somehow. So I think we can figure it out as well. So that's all I've got to say.
Bob, taking place this morning, mayor's meeting, and I hope you. I said thanks for taking my place this morning with the mayor's meeting, and
Okay.
I hope you pass along to me what you learned.
Yeah.
Monte, thank you a lot for being here.
Thank
Putting
you.
this together.
You're welcome. Thanks, Al, for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Stay
See
healthy.
you, Tommy, Larry.
All right.
Bob.
Yeah.